Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Do you suffer from an insatiable desire for violence? Is your skin green in color and do your teeth stick out of your mouth? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you might be an orc. And I encourage you to seek the help of your local YouTube doctor. You know, like me. Hey interns, I'm orthopedic surgeon Dr. Chris, and today we are delving into the insane biology of Warhammer 40K's orcs. This isn't our first foray into the grimdark world of Warhammer 40K, having already covered the heroic space marines and their extensive organ implantation process. But today's ugly green test subjects will push the bounds of modern medicine even further as we attempt to determine how close we are to creating orcs in the 21st century. As always, we'll ground our discussion in human anatomy as I teach you how to think like a surgeon. Now, as many of you already know, in the far-flung future, humanity has a galaxy-wide empire called the Imperium. Unfortunately for us, we're surrounded by aliens and demonic forces that want to kill us. In fact, every faction in the 40K universe is hell-bent on conquering the galaxy for their own aims and will stop at nothing to achieve it, bro. Except for the orcs. They kind of just want to have fun.
Attention, orc. Yeah, whatever.
Orc origin. No, seriously, orcs enjoy violence and bloodshed because they were made for it. You see, orcs were created by an ancient race of aliens called the Old Ones. The Old Ones were at war and needed some extra help. So they engineered a race of heavily muscled, hyper-aggressive war machines to do the fighting for them. Ironically, it was the Old Ones who faded into obscurity, while the orcs thrived in the carnage and formed their own galaxy-wide empires. When humanity eventually took to the stars, they inevitably ran into these green-skinned monsters, leading to countless battles. Gene editing. Of course, in the faraway future, this makes perfect sense. Perhaps the Old Ones used an advanced version of gene editing to create orcs from existing organisms. Genes are sequences of DNA that cells use as a blueprint to make proteins, the building blocks for everything you see here. If DNA are letters, genes are like sentences, since they contain information. And we're the poetry. CRISPR. But seriously, in our timeline, gene editing techniques like CRISPR can be used to insert or delete parts of the DNA code. For this process, scientists design a piece of genetic code that matches the part of the DNA they want to edit. Then a protein called Cas9 lines up the matching DNA segment and cuts it out, thereby deleting the gene from the organism. Engineered sequences of DNA can then be used to replace the deleted sequence. While gene editing has helped us understand the roles genes play in health and disease, we are still very far from regularly applying it to treat patients for specific diseases. For context, something as simple as eye color is controlled by 16 different genes. CRISPR babies. But this didn't stop scientists in 2018 at Southern University of Science and Technology in China from using CRISPR to edit the genes of 3 children while still in the embryo stage. Thankfully, the kids turned out okay. But this caused an uproar in the medical and scientific communities that led to the lead scientists being jailed for unethical practices. Now, if this were the Imperium, those scientists would be getting a raise, man. Gene editing an orc. Despite being some 40,000 years in the future, humanity's understanding of medical science is not too far ahead of our own. We can imagine a Magos biologist of the Adaptus Mechanicus, the tech priests of Mars who study alien biology, using CRISPR to create an orc out of human DNA. While primate DNA might be more lore accurate, this is, above all, a channel concerned with human anatomy, and we'll learn more by conducting experiments on our own kind. But interns, please beware. We'll have to work in secret, because the Imperium will label us traitors for editing the sacred human form. And we all know what happens to traitors in 40K.
There are only 2 things for which I will shoot a man. The first is heresy.
Since most orcs are jacked to the tits, we could start by genetically modifying genes associated with muscular development, like myostatin, which is a negative regulator of muscle growth.
But sir, we were only... and the second is interrupting me.
That means it helps limit muscle mass, such that when we inhibit it, muscle growth increases, as you may remember from the Space Marine video. And no, muscle size isn't everything when it comes to athletic performance, but most experts agree that it plays an important role along with sport-specific training. Since orcs are pretty much always fighting enemies or even each other, their bodies excel in those movement patterns. Like in MMA, the more a fighter spars in training, the more comfortable they are in a real fight because they are used to the stressors of their sport. But orcs don't need a black belt in jiu-jitsu, since all this muscle gives them strength to wield giant axes, blades, and other heavy weaponry like a baby would hold a rattle. With absolute glee, of course. Aggression. Now, we don't want a gentle giant, no siree. Our orc must be very aggressive. In order to achieve this, we could delete the monoamine oxidase A or MAOA gene, as the lack of this gene is associated with violent criminals. But not everyone who lacks this gene is filled with homicidal intent, since other factors like drug use and childhood experiences also play a role. We could also look to boost aggression by turning our test subject into a tren bro, as high testosterone is associated with aggressive behavior. Or maybe we could just go ahead with all of the above. Throw the kitchen sink at it, like an orco pain boy might do. Height comparison. Now, how does an average human physically stack up against an orc? The basic orc boy is about 2 meters tall, or just above 6'5". The average human is around 1.7 meters, or 5'6", and with only 1 to 2% of the global population reaching 6'5" or above, most orcs would absolutely maug us. Our closest comparison would be a competition level strongman, like Hafthor Bjornsson. Imagine staring down an army of those dudes. Sure, proper nutrition is important for determining height, but genetics control over 80% of the variation in human height. There are likely hundreds of different genes working together to determine individual height, so we'll need to spend a bit more time in the lab figuring out which ones to edit. But as we explored in the Space Marine video, surgical bone lengthening procedures are a possible alternative.
It all started in December in Turkey when Sigurds underwent his first of what will be 6 surgeries.
They cut the bone, they put a rod in it, and they connect a device outside the leg that connects to the rod inside the leg.
That is correct. We literally cut open the bone and insert a mechanical device that stretches it slowly and painfully from the inside out. Though the recovery process is intense, those willing to endure the procedure like Dinzel Sigers stand to gain up to 6 inches in height via lengthened bones. Fungus. But wait a damn minute, bro. Can mushrooms even have bones? I ask this because technically, orcs are a fungus, the same stuff you find in your shower when you don't wash it regularly. This creature looks a little bit more complicated than the portobellos I sauteed with my steak last night. These images and notes are from Simon Spurrier, the author of the book Xenology, a Warhammer 40K lore book that covers the diverse alien menace that threatens the Imperium. What we're looking at here shares some resemblance to a human with bones, muscles, and some organs. Naturally, we'll start from the skeleton and work our way out. Bones. Orc bones are similar to our own, with a hard outer shell made of calcium phosphate and a soft spongy marrow on the inside, which Spurrier notes that is fungal in nature. Like our own bone marrow, which makes new red and white blood cells, orc bone marrow could be where new orc fungal cells are created. The old ones may have altered the genetic makeup of bone marrow within the DNA of a primitive primate, combining it with fungal cells to form the basis of the orc skeletal system. This, however, is far beyond our current capacity. Remember, genes are freaking complicated. We'll need to start a lot smaller.
Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds.
What you're seeing is a bullet ant, whose nervous system and musculature has been overridden by a fungus called Cordyceps unilateralis, by the work of a mycelial network. That's right, a branching root-like structure consisting of tiny fungal threads has hijacked this ant's brain and body. Oh yes, this exists right here on Earth, bro. And you may remember the zombie ant uproar when The Last of Us TV series came out last year.
Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head.
Okay, but Doc, ants, orcs, zombies, where the hell are you going with all of this? Well, as it turns out, the mycelium fibers literally weave their way through the ant's body, where they communicate directly with its nervous system and musculature via electrical impulses. Once the ant has been hijacked, the parasitic fungus causes it to sacrifice itself for the sake of the shrooms, man. It just so happens that the basics of the nervous system and the mechanics of muscle contraction share similarities between humans and ants. Namely, little electrical impulses allow the internal structures of our body to communicate with each other, just like fungal mycelia.
So in order to jump from infecting an ant and becoming a mammal, a human parasite, it would require so many genetic changes.
Thankfully, as Dr. Araujo points out, we are far more complex than ants, and it is this very complexity that defends us from being hijacked by the mushrooms in our salad. But that's nothing time and evolution can't fix. Imagine, for instance, if this mycelial network were surgically implanted into the human bones little by little. As we currently exist, the total replacement of bone marrow is impossible, but modern technology just might be able to create conditions whereby fungus and human tissue can coexist. I mean, there are even cases of people's brains being infected by fungi, like this guy who had mold growing in his brain. We would need to feed the fungus a simple diet of sugars and other basic molecules so it doesn't feast on human tissue and zombify us like in The Last of Us. We'd also have to find a way to disarm the immune system against the foreign fungal body. But these are at least plausible challenges to overcome. Then, over time, through selective breeding, the fungus integrates into the human tissue. And bam! Fungus marrow a la orcs, some 38,000 years ahead of schedule. On this channel, we strive to teach all of you interns about human anatomy in an engaging way. But when you are not watching my videos, there are other fantastic ways to learn about science, like the sponsor of this video, Brilliant. Brilliant is an online education service dedicated to teaching you about science, technology, engineering, and math in a fun, engaging, interactive manner. And it is one of the most effective ways to learn about these topics. Math was always a weak spot for me, and with lessons covering all types of math at a variety of levels, whether it's algebra, geometry, or calculus, Brilliant can help you to understand how to use math to solve everyday problems in business and in your everyday life. And with lessons available on both desktop or on your mobile device, you can learn at any time, no matter where you are, making it easy to establish a daily learning habit. With lessons crafted by teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, among others, you have access to award-winning content that is uniquely effective at developing critical thinking skills using a first principles approach. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/Dr. Chris Raynor or scan the QR code. The link is also in the description. Bone thickness. Of course, orc bones are also a lot thicker than our own, which helps them withstand more injury and supports their immense strength. In humans, bone thickness is an important marker of health and supports the mechanical function of bone. Our bones are constantly being replaced at a molecular level as the calcium flows in and out of the bone matrix as part of a process called bone remodeling. To sustain thicker bones, orcs probably have a faster rate of bone remodeling, or at least a remodeling process that is skewed in favor of bone production. We know that strength training increases bone thickness to an extent, but we would need a lot more than a good workout routine to get close to an orc. We could change the genetic code of a gene known as the LDL receptor related protein 5, or LRP5, since a mutation in this gene is associated with higher bone density. Body cavity. Up next, we'll take a trip inside the main body cavity of the orc. Here we see what happens to be a crude respiratory system, as Spurrier notes. Distinct organs suggest pulmonary musculature. We're talking about muscles analogous to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, which aid humans in inhalation and exhalation. We are left to assume the distinct organs to which Spurrier is referring are similar to human lungs, receptacles for the air they breathe in, trachea, etc. Respiration. So far, so good. In humans, the oxygen we take into our lungs diffuses into the blood, which the heart pumps around the body to deliver said oxygen to various structures. And although the heart is a muscle, it is not considered a part of the pulmonary system. Rather, it pumps blood through the pulmonary system. Surely Spurrier was aware of this distinction. His notes are so thorough. And his failure to mention a heart seems too glaring an omission to be an accident. Heart. I mean, the proposition of a heartless orc is suitable, but I do think some form of pumping mechanism would be necessary. Perhaps the heart is simply less important in orcish biology. It may be possible under some extreme circumstances orcs have other means to transport oxygen around their bodies. First off, you may be surprised to learn that fungi can actually breathe oxygen. In a sense. However, the respiration is part of their metabolic processes, integrated throughout their bodies via the mycelial network. The oxygen diffuses through cell walls and membranes, reaching the entirety of the fungal structure directly. Thus, we can imagine oxygen seeping slowly through the orc body to get it where it needs to go. No central pump, that is to say a heart, is necessary. Mycelial network. Now, if human tissue were encouraged to coexist alongside fungal cells long enough for the mycelial network to spread throughout the body of the host, it might be possible to achieve a similar system within a humanoid form. The resultant fungal-human symbiote, less immediately reliant on oxygen. Bam! One step closer to orcs, baby. Muscular circulation. Furthermore, did you know that in humans, skeletal muscles aid venous blood return, which is why our legs are sometimes referred to as the second heart. As muscles contract and relax, they exert mechanical pressure on the veins, pushing blood through them, back to the heart. In the heat of battle, when an orc's movement is continuous, their circulatory system might rely more heavily on muscular pumping. And we know they're not short in the muscular department. A puny human could sustain an injury to the heart, lungs, or diaphragm and face hypoxia, and subsequently vital organ failure of the brain within minutes. But as we're beginning to understand, an orc may not rely as heavily on these structures to supply their muscles with oxygen. And as we proceed through Spurrier's notes, they continue to get more robust. Gills. He explains that orcs possess dense vegetative gills, presumably for osmotic oxygen absorption. Think of them swimming through the air as fish through water, which further bolsters their pulmonary system. A second method for oxygen intake means that even if the lungs or airway are compromised indefinitely, an orc can still survive. Organ transplant. The question is, how the hell am I going to get gills inside our human test subject? Currently, xenotransplantation, or the implantation of animal organs in people, is in the research phase. And even then, we're talking pig organs, particularly hearts and kidneys, which have been researched for human transplantation due to their size and compatibility. But gills? Who am I kidding? Might as well give it a shot. We're sure to learn something. Stomach. Of course, any refinement in the xenotransplantation process will also help us achieve the orc's multi-chambered stomach, since we could steal a couple extra chambers from a cow, who happens to have 4. Creatures with tougher, more fibrous diets often require more stomach chambers to aid in digestion, and since orcs are liable to eat just about anything, we'll have to make it a priority. Fungal soup. Now here's where things get even crazier. In orcs, many of the other organs you might expect to find, like kidneys, liver, pancreas, and spleen, are replaced with a fungal soup. I imagine the biological composition of this thick green fluid as a mixture of fungal mycelium, undifferentiated cells, protein, nutrients, enzymes, and of course, water. Just as humans are composed of 60 to 70% water, orcs would have a significant amount of water in their fungal soup, and tissues to support metabolism, nutrient transport, and other physiological functions, including the myriad of functions carried out by the soup. Unspecialized cells. In humans, organs are made up of different types of cells, specialized for specific tasks. By contrast, we can imagine that the orc fungal cells are unspecialized, allowing each cell to accomplish most of the tasks our organs do. Instead of being neatly divided into different compartments, orc fungal cells secrete all the enzymes and chemicals they need to survive into a soup that fills their body cavity. While this may sound crude compared to our multi-organ system, this makes the orc frame extremely robust. If an orc loses a chunk of its body, the rest of the fungal cells can simply pick up the slack to keep the orc going. Stem cells. Hold up. Does this regenerative process sound familiar to anyone? If you said stem cells, you might have a future in medicine. Theoretically, it might be possible to endow a living creature with the ability to induce pluripotent stem cells naturally, but it would involve significant genetic engineering and understanding of complex biological processes. Aside from the unimaginable amount of research required, one challenge would be to ensure the expression of these genes is tightly regulated to prevent uncontrolled cell growth or tumor formation. Or maybe that's why orcs never stop growing. Regeneration. Ultimately, this lack of cellular specialization is also probably what allows orcs to heal from serious injuries and regrow lost limbs. This is analogous to some types of lizards who can regrow a tail by forcing unspecialized stem cells to reform the lost limb. Man, if my patients could regenerate, I'd probably be out of a job. I wonder if there's something for me to do in orc society. Do they even have orthopedic surgeons? This one-size-fits-all organ design sure is handy, but would absolutely necessitate the existence of the aforementioned stomach and a very simple renal bowel system to excrete waste. If their stomach acid, which by the way is strong enough to break down metal, leaked into their big old body cavity, it could destroy them from the inside out. And God forbid the waste products they produce get jumbled up inside their body. It makes me wonder if an orc can get sepsis. We definitely don't need these Frankensteins getting any more rotten. Chlorophyll. It should be noted that fungal cells in the soup contain a green pigment that resembles chlorophyll, a chemical used by plants to absorb energy from the sun. This not only gives orcs' skin its green color, but it also means that orcs can go for long periods without eating so long as they have sunlight. Our Magos biologists will probably have to insert some plant genes so that fungal cells contain chloroplasts, the plant equivalent of mitochondria that do photosynthesis. Okay, this is getting out of hand. It's almost as if the old ones half-built an orc frame, furnished it with some basic biological structures, then poured in some magic green Kool-Aid that somehow takes care of the rest. I mean, how do the undifferentiated fungal cells know what biological function to perform and when? In humans, undifferentiated stem cells can be activated by various signals, including chemical cues and changes in the environment. While the nervous system can influence some processes, stem cell activation primarily responds to local cues in the body. So, all they need to think about is, well, destruction. Brain. Turns out orcs have a surprisingly large brain that resembles that of a human or an Eldar, a race of space elves also created by the old ones. So what the hell are orcs doing with that extra real estate? Spurrier mentions a massively developed paleo-pallium, or old brain concurrent with subjects' natural aggression and pack predilection. If this leaves us with less brain matter available for complex reasoning, problem solving, and planning, then damn it, we're right on target. Psychology. In fact, they rely on primal instincts, brute strength, and numbers to overwhelm their enemies. But sometimes something is so stupid that it just works. If enough orcs believe something, like thinking that painting their trucks red will make them go faster, their collective stupidity allows them to bend space-time to actually go faster. Go figure. I mean, who doesn't actually love going fast? Orcs also use this basic form of collective consciousness to gather in large numbers to form a Wa, a massive horde that can conquer whole solar systems. Wa is also their war cry. Pain boys. Some orcs can even draw inspiration from the orc collective consciousness to do basic medical procedures like amputations and connecting crude prosthetic limbs. The pain boys, the doctors and surgeons of orc society, can take advantage of the robust orc frame to go as far as grafting the head of a decapitated orc back onto its body. Amazingly, this has already kind of happened in real life, as there are several cases of surgeons being able to reattach the person's head after internal decapitation, when the spinal column is separated from the skull. So maybe I would have a place in orc society after all. Nerves. Spurrier also notes that orcs have few nerve endings, which explains why they can shrug off injuries that would cripple a regular human. While this makes sense in Warhammer 40K, not having many nerve endings in real life means not knowing when you're hurt, increasing risks like infections or bones not healing properly. Skin. Reproduction. And this wouldn't be an anatomy lesson without talking about the largest organ of all, the skin. Orcish skin is multi-layered like our own, with an epidermis, or outermost layer, that forms a tough, leathery exterior that releases fungal spores. Reproduction. Like all fungi, orcs reproduce asexually, so they don't need to mate to have offspring, unlike what some fandoms might have you think. As orcs are busy looting and pillaging, their spores land and take root to begin creating an orc ecosystem. The orc fungus does not infect humans, but once a planet in 40K is infected, the inhabitants have little choice but to prepare to face hordes of screaming greenskins. Even if they win the battle, the taint of orc fungus may be enough for the Imperial Inquisition to order exterminatus. Remember, to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/Dr. Chris Raynor or scan the QR code on screen. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Okay, everyone, take a deep breath. We've covered the basic elements of orcish anatomy and racked our brains to come up with some form of modern medical analog for most things. If you enjoyed the content of this video, be sure to let me know and I'll be happy to keep the ball rolling, as there are several other interesting anatomical specimens in the orc ecosystem. Squigs, snotlings, grots, knobs, and the list goes on. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave us a comment and give it a big thumbs up to feed the algorithm. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome, and be sure to subscribe for more content that helps you understand human anatomy in an engaging way. Don't forget to follow my gym, Human 2.0 Fitness, for free right here on YouTube, where we post content that helps you move better and prevent injury. Or its sister channel, Human at Home, where you can learn how to be healthy where you live. Otherwise, as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho, where we see one, do one, teach one.
What?